So my budget build for my Omnath deck kind of focused on hitting landfall triggers and then finding sack outlets to get rid of my elementals and start bolting people or creatures to the face. So when I drop a land, I get a landfall trigger. I get to put one of my 5/5 tokens into play. I can sack it or attack someone, make combat really tricky, fun, crazy things with all my ramp spells in late game. But I tried to stick to elemental tribal, except for a few utility creatures. Most of my stuff is enchantments, tribal creatures, a few mana rocks, and a good bit of 12 ramp spells, as well as 36 lands. So let's get into it. I run Reliquary Tower just in case I have ramp or a bunch of elemental creatures in my hand late game that I need to play out. I can eventually do that, or I can just hold on to them with no maximum hand size. Ghost Town's a really fun utility land. I can play it. I can return it to my hand and play it next turn if I need to, if I don't have a land drop and I need an elemental. Blighted Woodlands, really fun tech. I get to get 2 land drops out of it if I can pay 4, tap, and sack it, so not bad. Terramorphic Expanse, exact same thing, just essentially 2 land drops off 1 land. Evolving Wilds, 2 land drops off of 1 land. Gruul Turf is just kind of mana fixing. It allows me to get 2 manas, a red and a green, as well as, I can return and get another land drop the next turn. And then I play 19 forests. I chose full art just because I like my full art lands. I don't have tons of them. And then I also play 12 mountains. 12 full art basics. And that's it for my lands. And then I'm going to get into my mana rocks, a little bit more mana fixing here. We got Soul Ring, basic, add 2. Hedron Archive, it allows me to draw 2 cards late game if I don't want to just stick with my 2 mana. Caged Sun, this was a little over budget. This was one of the more expensive cards in the deck, but I also already had this available to me, so that's the only reason I included it. It just allows me to double my mana relatively easily. Elixir of Immortality, I can gain 5 life and put all my ramp spells back into my hand if I need it late game, or anything else in my graveyard. Hammer of Perforos, I like giving my creatures haste. All of my tokens will have haste for 3, so not bad overall. I'm essentially considering running the Bow of Nylea to give my creatures Death Touch to make combat more difficult, but I would have to replace one of my enchantments, possibly the last enchantment that I will get to. I might replace for Bow for, the Death Touch as well as the 4 abilities that come on the Bow of Nylea. New tech, Sword of the Animus for Magic Origins. Whenever one of my, either Omnath or my creatures gets to attack, I can also drop a land and give myself another token. Journeyer's Kite's just a mana sink late game to continuously, pay 3, tap, and search for a basic land. Put it in my hand and play it if I need to, if I don't have a land drop. Culling Day is one of my sacrifice outlets. It was just a super cheap one that I already had. Yeah, I can sack a creature, and then I can also draw cards later on based on the number of counters on it. Ashnod's Altar, I prefer this art over the new Eternal Masters art, but that's okay. This is just my favorite. I can sack one of my tokens to bolt something for 3 damage and also add 2 colorless mana to my mana pool. Evolutionary Leap, I love this card. I run Tribal Elemental, so it's actually not too bad in this, and it also just counts as a sacrifice outlet for 1 green. Goblin Bombardment, just a cheap sack outlet. It allows me to essentially deal 1 extra damage onto that bolt. Perilous Forays, this is kind of a cheap combo. I try not to go off too much where I can pay 1 and sack one of my tokens to drop a land into play tapped and get another token. And I can continuously just do that and create tokens over and over and over for this sacrifice effect. But I can only do so much of it in 1 turn, and then if I get to untap and do it again, it just creates all kinds of problems. I can clear the board relatively easily. Retreat to Kazandu, just basic life gain, 2 life every time I drop a land. I don't know, it just kind of keeps me alive late game since this is a budget build. Zendikar Resurgent, I opened this up in my pre-release for Oath of the Gatewatch, and I like being able to double my mana. I mean, it costs 7, so late game, it's alright, but it's not too bad. And then if I get to cast my creatures later on, I get to draw, so it kind of works. Elemental Bond, you know, just drawing a card essentially whenever one of my elemental 5/5s comes into play off a land. So, not too bad. Fires, it's just a three mana card that gives me haste, and I can pump something if I need to for the last bit of damage, but mostly just for haste. Fecundity is fun. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller may draw a card. I do have quite a bit of elementals that die, but my tokens get exiled, so it's not super perfect. I'm considering replacing this as well. Vicious Shadows. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may have Vicious Shadows deal damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. Kind of helps. I can just put some extra damage in eventually. Zendikar's Royal, Landfall, get an extra 2/2 elemental. Not bad. Raid of the Raging Storm is really fun in multiplayer. Everybody gets essentially a 5/1 red elemental with trample haste. And they just can't attack me or a planeswalker I have, which I have none. So just give everybody elementals and let them attack each other. Ranchion's Tread, whenever my tokens come in, it deals 5 damage to target creature or player. Quality enchantment. Warstorm Surge costs an additional 1 more, and it's the exact same. Whenever it enters under the battlefield under my control, it just deals damage equal to power to target creature or player. Death's Presence, one of the last enchantments. This was the 100th card that I put in the deck. I wasn't so sure of. That whenever a creature dies, I get to move its power essentially and 1/1 counters over to another creature I control. So I could sack one of my 5/5s and move 5 counters over to the next one, and sack that and move 10 counters over to the third one, and just start doing that. And that actually kind of works later on with one of my creatures, one of my non-elemental creatures. It's an avatar, but we'll get into that in a little bit, and it kind of combos with that really well. But this can create a really big creature that some people just can't deal with, especially if I can find a way to give it trample. Khalni Heart Expedition, just basic mana ramp. That's why it was the last enchantment before my ramp spells. Alright, let's get into my ramp. Explosive Veg, 2 basic lands. Cultivate, 2 basic lands. Nissa's Renewal is my favorite ramp spell in here. I get to gain 7, search for 3 basic lands, put them on a battlefield tapped. Can't complain about that. Pilgrimage, usually have spell mastery, so I can usually get 3 basic forests instead of 2. Kodama's Reach, 2 basics, 1 into hand, 1 battlefield. Animist Awakening, late game X spell, multiple land drop triggers. Spell mastery is usually a thing, so I can usually get, untapped lands and start casting more things. Skyshroud Claim, search your library for 2 basic lands, 2 basic forests, drop them in, play for 4 mana, not bad. Threshold on Far Wanderings is generally pretty easy, 3 basic land cards into play tapped. Sylvan Scrying allows me to grab one of my 6 utility lands, whether that is my Ghost Town or Hedron or Blighted Woodland or Reliquary Tower. So not bad. Nissa's Expedition, the Convoke is generally okay. It's not too bad. I don't like paying full 5 for it, but I can usually get 2 lands out of it, so the creatures replace themselves. Primal Growth is a really cool ramp spell. I can sacrifice one of my tokens to bolt something and pay the kicker for this. And once I pay the kicker, I get 2 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield untapped. I have a few utility spells, only a few spells that are non-ramp spells, and I play those. I'm going to show you play those before my creature collection. Second Harvest, new tech from Shadows over Innistrad, just a token doubler, kind of nice. Elemental Appeal, one of my favorite Zendikar sorceries. I get to pay 9 and I can drop in a 14/1 Trampling Haster. Big creature. Most people have to block it because that trample gets through. Shamanic Revelation, draw a card for each creature I control. Generally, it's a large number of tokens, and then I get to gain 4 life for each of those 5/5 elemental tokens that Omnath brings in. Pretty big spell, can change the game at 5 mana. Keep me alive. This is a cheeky win con. I'm not a big fan of it, but when my creatures, if they're doubling with Death's Presence and I can move those counters around, if I have to, I can attack everybody at the table with a token that has, 1/1 trample and infect. And those 6/6 trampling infectors, if I send 2 or 3 at each person, it's generally pretty game over, especially when everybody wants to hate on my tokens. See the Unwritten. One card I'm not sure about keeping in here is a sorcery. This might be a replacement for Bow of Nylea. It's essentially just, with most of the time it's ferocious, I get to look at the top 8 cards and put 2 creatures onto the battlefield. It's a worse creature tutor because I only get 2 creature cards in the top 8 and I don't have that many creatures. I think Collected Company would be better, but hardly any of my creatures are under 3. Sack Tribe Elder, basic land drop, sack, get an extra creature. Old Man Grandpa, sack him, draw a card, and get 2 land cards, put them into my hand, not bad. Burnished Tart is just 2 more basic lands onto the battlefield tapped, 2 more land drops. Eternal Witness gets anything back, usually pretty incredible. Stalking Vengeance is great with my Death's Presence, because he's a 5/5 haster for 7, but whenever a creature I control dies, it deals damage equal to the power to target creature or to target player. Now with Death's Presence, where I'm moving those counters, when they get huge, just starts passing them on. That damage just becomes exponential to a player. Guy's Revenge, I like Elemental Tribal, and an 8/5 for 7 with haste is incredible. Mindsparker is another fun elemental with first strike, and then it's great against white and blue players, so that way whenever they play a white or blue instant or sorcery, Mindsparker deals 2 damage directly to that player. Pretty great. Smoke Braider, one of my creatures that just adds 2 mana of any combination, red, green, green, to cast elementals or use it for their abilities. Pretty good. Crater Elemental is a 0/6, essentially a defender for 3 mana, and I can pay 1 and sack it to deal 4 damage to target creature, and then combined with Omnath's ability that deals an extra 3 to a target creature or player, so I can kill a 7-drop or a 7-power creature, or just deal 4 to a creature, 3 to a player, or I can just later on pay 3 and give it a Formidable and turn it into an 8/6. So it becomes a big beater late game. Rubble Hulk, just fun with Blood Rush. Pay 3 and discard it, and it gets +X/+X, where X is the number of lands I control. Usually by the time I cast this, it just becomes a huge creature that needs to be dealt with. Or I can just play Rubble Hulk out for himself as 6, and he just becomes a big beater. Sylvos Rogue Elemental, just a great card. An 8/5 for 6 with Trample, Regenerate, just an incredible card. Love that elemental. Tyrant of Discord is an elemental that is a lot of fun for the table. I love playing red for its fun, wacky chaos. When it enters the battlefield, I get to pick an opponent, and then a permanent he or she controls at random gets sacrificed. If it's a non-land permanent, they do it again. Great card, it's really fun. Woodland Behemoth, this was like a 15-cent card that I had. It becomes an 8/8 with Trample, probably about the time that you can cast it. It's already an 8/8 Trampler. Rakamar, one of my old generals, I just decided to toss into here. She's a 2/2 haster for 4 that you can pay a 5th red and tap and put a 3/1 elemental haster into play. Green Warden of Marasa, just a double Eternal Witness, really great card. 5/4 for 6 is not super great, but an elemental that's a double Eternal Witness. Skull Mulcher essentially is an elemental that counts as another sack outlet with Devour, and I get to draw cards for each one it devours. Soul Surge, it doesn't have flying, but it is a first striking elemental where its power is equal to the number of creatures, so essentially based on the number of tokens I have on the board, it can become relatively large as a first strike and kill pretty much anything and keep itself alive. Really fun card. Zendikar Incarnate from Origins, just power equal to the number of lands I control. Relatively large late game. Can die really easily, but it can also be a 25 4 at turn 8 or 9. Kiln Fiend, just one of my favorites. I used to play him in my red-blue Delver Kiln Fiend deck, and he's just fun. If I can cast a ramp spell, he just gets +3/+0 for each ramp spell, and that's not bad late game. Thicket Elemental is a great creature. If you pay the kicker, I get to search, or I get to reveal the top cards of my library until I get a creature, and then I get to put it into play and then shuffle everything else. So essentially, instead of paying 5, I pay 7 for 4/4 and then the next creature on my library. Thicket Elemental is incredible. Mina and Den, another great pair, I should say. I can play an additional land, helps with my land drops. And I can also pay 2 to give something trample at the end and go over the top if I have to. And I can also, drop that land next turn for a land drop. And my last card in here is my creature. Ember Swallower is an elemental, and it's a 4/5 for 4, which is pretty good in my opinion, for an elemental. And late game, I can pay 7 and give it Monstrosity, where I can sacrifice 3 lands, possibly hurt somebody else for their 3 lands when I've got so many. But that's it. This was my Omnath EDH budget deck. I only spent 30 on the deck, spent 10 on Dragon Shield sleeves because of the amount of ramp. I'm probably shuffling once every turn, twice a turn, just depends. But there's a lot of shuffling to be had, so that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking my budget EDH deck. Feel free to comment in the box below. Leave a like, subscribe. Let me know what I should do from now on. I prefer my budget tribal. Thanks. Have a good one.